Welcome to the Smart Talk series, the show for professionals who want strategies, tips, and real talk about all things PR, marketing, and social media. Your host is Melissa Vella Williamson, an award-winning, accredited, and nationally recognized PR pro and communication thought leader. And now your host, Melissa Vella Williamson.
Hello, and welcome to the Smart Talk series. I'm Melissa Vella Williamson. This season, our focus is on practicing social responsibility. I hope you've had a chance to listen to each episode of Season 2. If you haven't yet, I recommend you go back to hear the insights our guests shared, because what I'm sharing today is like icing on their cake. As communicators, we just can't ever learn enough. Just when we think we know something, it changes. As PR pros and marketing and communication practitioners, we need to move with change. And if we can, we should try to be in front of it. In terms of being socially responsible, our commitment to education is probably where it all begins. If we don't know better, we can't possibly do better. And real leaders know and do better. That's being socially responsible, not ignoring the role we each play as leaders at work, at home, and in our own lives. This episode is going to be all about how to be socially responsible ourselves. Because if you're a top leader, then you know a commitment to social responsibility has to come from the top. And if you're a new pro, then you should know change can start from the ground up. I'm going to share my top 3 principles for being a socially responsible professional with you. Principle 1. Move upstream to fix root problems. Meeting people where they actually are is the best approach to connecting these days. For almost 2 years of disrupted, unprecedented, and all the adjectives we've used to convey how chaotic this pandemic journey has been, it's definitely easier to serve people where they naturally are. In healthcare, there's a parable that's often shared to explain this upstream care model or idea. And the story goes that one day a couple went to the river to fish. They're enjoying a peaceful time fishing when suddenly a man starts floating downstream towards them, and they realize he's struggling to swim. They can't let that man drown, so they rescue him and get back to fishing, but then here comes another person. They are also swept up in the current and drowning. Soon their afternoon consists of them rescuing people who keep floating down this river. The couple decides to walk upstream and see what is going on. They realize having a barrier put in place would prevent people from falling into an obscured part of the river that they're not noticing when they're taking pictures in front of this beautiful landscape. So they work with local officials to get a barrier put up. The chronic problem is solved in a more sustainable way. Going upstream in healthcare means figuring out what is causing a patient to not take their meds, which lands them in the ER again and again. Perhaps they have a mental health challenge or lack financial means, and that is the root problem. Addressing a root issue, like making sure the cost of meds is covered, is a better way to solve their problem. My nonprofit healthcare client, Methodist Healthcare Ministries, is transforming their organization by embracing upstreamism. To me, going upstream is a socially responsible thing to do because doing what we've always done doesn't allow for our meeting new needs or filling gaps that were never even closed by an old approach. For PR pros and communicators, our going upstream to figure out the real problems will help our organizations take the kind of actions that will make a lasting difference. John F. Kennedy said, "For of those to whom much is given, much is required." Or if you're into superheroes, in Spider-Man they say, "With great power comes great responsibility." Any person of influence, meaning people listen to you and follow your lead, and we know that happens without fancy titles. Any person of influence has a responsibility to try to make their impact a positive one. To be different in the marketplace, keep from duplicating efforts, and really make an impact, go upstream from the social issues you address or the philanthropic needs you typically donate to. What root issue may be the cause of this reoccurring problem, and what can you do to help fix it? My second principle, do more good than harm. Doing more good than harm doesn't sound groundbreaking or even new, but so little about being socially responsible is. Ask this of your organization. Do we do more good than harm? There's nothing wrong with being a for-profit entity, but if you're making money in ways that leaves collateral damage behind you, calling yourself socially responsible or saying your organization practices corporate social responsibility just sounds wrong. Think about that big picture. Is your being in business or in your profession better or worse for society? Again, it's okay to make money, and perhaps your service model must cause some harm to the environment, for example. What can you do to make that negative outcome less over time? How can you improve things a little in the areas that align with your values? And is there any way to counteract the bad with some good? No matter your role, if you're a lobbyist, a social media manager, or a public relations pro, we can help our organizations do more good than harm. Back to healthcare as an example. In healthcare, first, do no harm has been tied to the original Hippocratic Oath. But when I did research for the podcast, I found it's actually not a part of that oath. The phrase was written in another of Greek physician Hippocrates' writings, but it actually says, the physician must be able to tell the antecedents, know the present, and foretell the future. They must mediate these things and have two special objects in view with regard to disease, namely to do good or to do no harm. Whoa, doesn't that sound like the responsibility of crisis communicators? We're looking at the past, the present, and we need to forecast the future, all while trying to make the best choice with the least negative outcome. What I found also intriguing is that the Harvard Health blog I got this information from goes on to say, the fact is that when difficult, real-time decisions must be made, it's hard to apply the first do no harm dictum because estimates of risk and benefit are so uncertain and prone to error. But it is a reminder that we need high-quality research to help us better understand the balance of risk and benefit for the tests and treatments we recommend. Ultimately, it is also a reminder that doctors should neither overestimate their capacity to heal nor underestimate their capacity to cause harm. Organizations and individuals both have great potential to help or hurt in our work. And like doctors, we should always be mindful of that. The last and third principle is to be an ally. Even the best of professionals have some level of bias and possible otherisms that we have to unlearn and manage. Whether it's racism, sexism, classism, colorism, or some other ism, I've found one thing to be true. We all have privilege in some contexts and are disadvantaged in others. For example, my being a Latina has made me feel at an advantage in some circumstances and then at a disadvantage in others. In San Antonio, for example, where the majority of the population is Hispanic or Latino or Latina, it's not unusual to see a Latina in the workplace, and we're growing in leadership positions every day. When I'm certain places like the Latina Leadership Institute events, my being a Latina helps me fit in naturally, and being a part of that group is definitely a privilege and an advantage. In the public relations industry, though, being Latina gives me a unique perspective, and that can be a specialty area, but it can also be limiting when I'm thought of as only being able to serve Latinx audiences or accounts. So recognizing that we probably have some type of bias, and we've all been othered, which is made to feel less than or held back by something we just can't control, helps build the foundation of how to be an ally. When we recognize that we also have privilege in certain areas, we can share that privilege and help be an ally to close inequitable gaps. To be an ally, Think about what the basics of being a friend is. Showing up for people, taking risks to support others, setting realistic expectations for what you can give to a relationship, making time for one another, and working through conflicts are cornerstones of being a good friend. And that's according to this WebMD article we'll share in the show notes. I literally looked this up so I wouldn't just share my own, here's what being a friend to Melissa means, bias on it. My point of view on allyship is based on those principles as well. Start by overriding your system, our system that may be imperfectly wired with biases, and think about how to befriend all types of people. Find something to connect on as humans and try to support their positive efforts and accomplishments as you would a friend. If we have an abundance mindset, that'll allow us to recognize there's enough business or opportunities or even customers to go around. We all have multiple identifiers. We're a woman, a man, a business owner, parent, caregiver, dog mom, you name it. Those multiple identifiers can help us to connect with others. Our differences can be seen as limitations or as leverages. So let's think of them as leverage. Anyone can work to become an ally. Speak up and give or share credit with someone who's earned it. Sponsor a person or nonprofit that is doing great things but could use a boost. Invite someone who doesn't normally get invited to sit at your event table or be part of your leadership committee or join you to collaborate on something. If you promote this concept in your workplace, allyship is a step towards showing you support social responsibility because it's in alignment with diversity, equity, and inclusion. But remember, as an individual, you can do this yourself. Following these 3 principles, move upstream to fix root problems, do more good than harm, and be an ally will not only help an organization make a positive social impact, but are great ways to start adding more purpose into your career. Thank you for joining me for the final episode of Season 2 of the Smart Talk series. We're so thankful you're a listener. Be sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss when our next season on communication specialties rolls out. If you haven't had a chance yet, pop over to prgearshop.com to check out our newest arrivals. We've got new designs for marketers, content creators, and journalists. And as always, think smart and communicate smart. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Smart Talk series. If you learned something or enjoyed our conversation, share it on social media or send to a friend. To learn more about this and other communication topics, visit mvw360.com. That's mvw360.com.